First, the family and I would like to thank all of you for coming. We're so thankful to Umpqua Valley, Cal Ripton, and Babe Ruth Baseball Club for allowing us to use this building. We're so grateful to all the volunteers who helped us set up this event. How appropriate is John spent more than 25 years working with his family in this building, and that many of you remembered as Carter Tire Company. In fact, the first time I met John was when I bought tires for my '59 Studebaker. That was over 46 years ago. He later named my car Sherman the Tank. He used that car like anyone else would use a pickup truck. He often threw wood in it, in the back seat, in the trunk. He hauled car parts in it, to and from work, tires, whatever, he would throw it in there. I remember one story, there's a brick wall right out here behind this building that faces Washington Street. When he pulled in the parking lot, the brakes gave way on this '59 Studebaker, and he rammed it into the wall to stop it. Fortunately, it stopped it. And then he had to get a tire iron out to pull the fenders away so that he could back it up. Well, as many of you also probably bought tires, TVs, appliances from John as well. He used to say nobody beats a Carter deal, sometimes in his sleep, probably rehearsing for his next TV commercial or something. He would have been so humbled by so many family and friends coming to celebrate his life. As was mentioned earlier, John was truly a miracle man. He was a remarkable man who maintained a sense of humor, his outgoing personality, and his friendly demeanor, even as many of his closest friends had no idea how ill he truly was. Every trip up to OHSU could have been his last, but he kept coming back, and each time seemingly stronger than when he left. He was simply amazing. Throughout his life, he overcame some tremendous obstacles that would have fallen most of us. His osteomyelitis, a bone disease caused when he was in a car accident in 1959 at the age of 13, was one of his most major obstacles. It nearly cost him his leg. He lived with major pain and inflammation of that leg for over 25 years. He had many hospitalizations, numerous surgeries, and the strongest medication available at that time. He used home IVs 24 hours a day for several months, and I was required to learn how to do that. Never wanted to be a nurse, never knew what was going to be in my future. We had to set the alarm around the clock to take the IVs from the freezer, to warm them up, to give them to him 6 times a day. He was on crutches throughout most of his high school years, and even returned to several class reunions on crutches, and was teased, "Are you still on crutches?" In 1984, he was indeed a miracle man when OHSU and John's fighting spirit cured him of this incurable disease. He lost his grandpa Doc, his father Bruce, at age 58, and he thought he was doomed. He drew a big sigh of relief when 58 came and went, and he was still here. Then his 2 brothers, Lauren at 35, Galen at 40, and finally his mother, Marianne, at 62. Shortly after his mom died, his beloved Grandma Pooh, the matriarch of the Carter Tire family, died. Grandma Pearl, who his family nicknamed Grandma Pooh, sometimes drove him crazy, but he missed her terribly when she died. There were so many things he still wanted to ask her. He missed his family so much that I often kidded him he could have half of mine. Since many of you know I'm from a family of 17 children, he just laughingly said, I said, well, I'll take the good ones, you can have the bad ones. Another obstacle was when his family business sold after his father passed away and he began working for a new owner under the family name. He said the change was difficult but disappointing as it ended up going bankrupt within a very few years after that transition. He continued working for several more tire companies, Riverside Tire Company on 2 occasions, Sears Auto Center, and Bill's Automotive and Towing, only to be laid off in 2005 at the age of 59. It was at that time he decided to say, I'm going to retire. 40 years in the tire business was plenty for him. In 2007, he was diagnosed with a severe heart condition. It progressed rapidly into pills by the handful, a pacemaker, a defibrillator, numerous ablations, and ultimately leading to total heart failure of his left ventricle in 2012. Between 2007 and 2012, he had so many recurring defibrillator episodes that he required 3 additional pacemaker defibrillator replacement procedures. Try and say that in one mouthful. He likened that to being kicked in the chest by a horse or hanging onto an electric fence and not able to let go. Then in 2012, a left ventricle assist device, LVAD for short, which required numerous ambulance rides, helicopter rides, life flights to Portland. Each one of those could have been in last, and instead, he seemed to beat the odds over and over again. His cardiologist at OHSU dubbed him the Miracle Man. His biggest regret with the LVAD was that he could no longer go swimming. He couldn't immerse himself in water, which was his passion since he grew up on the South Umpqua River. He was able to get past that like he did many other things by saying, what's more important, swimming or living? I'll bet you can guess which one he picked. I think I could write a book on John's experiences. Instead, I'll share a couple true stories with you. His very first ambulance ride to OHSU was diverted because he had some life-threatening breathing issues. He spent 3 days in the Salem ICU, which was uneventful until the last night we were there. About midnight, his electric bed began moving up and down on its own, moving up and down, undulating to the point that he finally rang for the nurses and said, I cannot sleep in this bed. You're going to have to get me another one. Of course, this is the middle of the night. The ICU was at full capacity, and he was told they didn't know if they could find another bed. Instead, they tried unplugging this bed. They tried reprogramming it. They finally told him they couldn't fix it. And so he told them, then why don't you try sleeping in it? He refused to back down, so at 1 o'clock in the morning, they finally brought him another bed from somewhere, moving it in, unplugging the old one. And as they unplugged the old one, no longer had power to it, they pushed it out in the hallway. It was still twisting and turning and moving up and down on its own. And it was still that way in the hallway. And so we called that bed the possessed bed. This is another true story. The next morning, another ambulance was called to take him to Portland, only to have the ambulance engine blow up on the freeway a few miles outside of Salem. I was following in my car behind the ambulance, which was doing about 80 miles an hour, trying to keep up with them because I had never been to OHSU. I wasn't sure where we were going. I didn't want to lose sight of the ambulance from the first experience a few days before. Well, all of a sudden, that ambulance, steam, black smoke, hot burning rubber flew all over my windshield in every direction. I'm thinking, what the heck? The ambulance pulled to the side of the freeway. The EMT calmly walked back to my car and said, your husband is fine, but the ambulance is dead. While we waited by the side of the road in 90-degree heat with cars whizzing by, their drivers rubbernecking the scene, yet another ambulance was called from Woodburn. As they moved him from one ambulance to the other, they tilted the gurney, and he felt for sure he was going to be dumped on the ground. It was enough to give me a heart attack just watching it. I can't even imagine how John kept his cool, his sense of humor throughout it all. Thankfully, they got him in the new ambulance and made it to OHSU without any further event. God was definitely looking out for him, as if this would have happened when he left on the first trip from Roseford to Salem, just a couple days earlier, he would have never made it for sure. When the cardiologist at OHSU examined him, John was in a hurry to get some answers because he'd been waiting now for 3 days to get there. The cardiologist looked at him and said, wait just a minute. We've waited 3 days for you to get here. Now it's your turn to be patient. After so many trips to OHSU, John asked the doctors if he would be getting the frequent flyer discount for his stay. They laughed, and instead they made him the ambassador of 11K, the cardiac unit. He was so outgoing and friendly and never spoke negatively, at least in public, about his LVAD, that he was asked repeatedly to visit other patients and their families awaiting LVAD surgery. And this is while he was a patient himself in the hospital with complications to his LVAD. He would calmly show him his equipment, explain how it worked, answer their questions, tell him of his experiences, and as you can imagine, he loved to tell stories. I remember him saying over and over and over again that having an LDAD really wasn't all that bad. Even though he was in the hospital at that time for his own complications, his focus was always focus on the things you can do, not on the things you can't. With so many hospitalizations, all the faces became familiar. The nurses loved him because he teased them constantly. His purpose, other than getting well, was to make them laugh, to tell them stories, and you can imagine, to talk their leg off. On several hospitalizations, the nurses told me they often fought over who would get to take care of John Carter. When they heard he was being life-flighted up from Roseburg, they would try to save him a room with the view. And I'm not kidding. If you've been to OHSU, their rooms definitely have a view. He loved the view of Mount Hood, the Willamette River, and he liked to watch the traffic and the night lights of the city. Once he arrived, they would all stop to check in on him, to visit with him whenever they passed his room. He thought he was a celebrity for sure. Even on the last visit to OHSU, many of the nurses from 11K, the cardiac unit, came up to see him on 12K, the cardiac ICU, when they heard he was there. After over 8 years with his heart problem, 3.5 of those with his LVAD, we finally had to give him permission to give up the fight on October the 1st, when it was obvious that his LVAD could not be fixed. He had such a true fighting spirit with an amazing will to live, was so courageous and humble, and even carried his sense of humor to the very end. Saying goodbye was probably one of the hardest things that we have ever had to do. He loved his family, his children Nancy and Ryan, his son-in-law Jeff, his grandchildren Natalie and Carter. They meant everything to him. He was so very proud of each and every one of you. He never got tired of writing about you or showing you pictures off to complete strangers. We will keep him in our hearts forever. I know he is in this building today, watching us and celebrating with us. And if he were here, he would say, "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my life. I will miss each and every one of you. Please take care of yourselves and please take care of each other. And I will see you again in the future." And his last words to you would be, "Can we get this party started?" Thank you all so much for coming. It just means the world to me to see all these familiar faces and to support our family. And I know that you all have stories to tell. I know that you have stories that you probably shouldn't tell. But we can share those while you're enjoying something to eat and drink a little bit later. Thank you.